know that kangaroos, which we know are found from fossil records in Australia, would have had to walk from Australia to walk back. Polar bears would have had to come down from the cold where they can live to the hot climate of the Middle East and somehow to find no one climb aboard and so on. Then at the end of this monstrous event with a cauldron of 3,000-degree water in which the ship is somehow maintaining itself, they got to wait till the water all disappears into some little raffle that these people are imagining, and then they've got to walk back through all this blood and carnage over dead, stinking creatures and so on. This is your view of how God created the universe, and how it developed over time, off of a little story in Genesis. And finally, before I turn to that story, Genesis, what about genetics? And I deliberately asked Dr. Hogan about it last time, and I will ask him about it very early on in my questions, because I know he hadn't been exposed to this before, so let's see how fast he learned from me. Remember, Noah and his children and their wives, that's what we have on the human side, all the other creatures were marched in 2 by 2. Well, what does that mean? That means they go back and breed. Then their children breed with each other, because there ain't no other line. Right? Then their grandchildren breed with each other, because there ain't no other line. And every generation thereafter. And it's a trivial calculation to show, and we have evidence, I don't know how many volumes of evidence to show that it's true, that inbreeding obliterates genetic diversity within individuals. So every human being in this room, approximately, if you go down to your genotype and compare the genes you got from your mother, the genes you got from your father, at 10% of the loci, they'll be different. We are outbred species that benefit from outbreeding. We benefit from genetic diversity within ourselves. World evidence show that. That gets obliterated by inbreeding. You know the ill effects of post-inbreeding. You've certainly heard about it. Certainly know that that's the reason why we tend to avoid it. But if you keep it up, and it just takes a few generations, you can, in 12, 15 generations, with that breeding, you can take that to 1/100th level. So instead of 10% of the loci being heterozygous, 1/10 of 1%. Yet if you look at all these creatures, a mere 4,000 years later or whatever, a mere 300 generations later, somehow they've all reconstituted the genetic variability that they lost in this inbreeding. Beyond credulity. Now, good, thank you. And I'll be done in 5 minutes. Now, there was a real flood back in that area of the world out of which the Bible came, and which many people believe is the reason for the flood story that you find in Genesis. One reason for this is that the same story is found in related peoples, different religions, different religious traditions, but they have a flood story. Occasionally you find a flood story elsewhere, but usually you do not. Every people, whether you go to the Kung in southern Africa, whether you go to China, Malaysia, wherever you go, Eskimos people have what's called an origin story, an origin myth. But it's only there that they have this flood. Well, what was the real flood? Dated by carbon-14 and repeatedly redated. It was about 8,600 years ago. It was the flooding of the Black Sea when the Mediterranean topped a natural land barrier and started spilling over into an area that was undersea water but had some freshwater small lakes and a lot of human habitation. But you know, when a sea reaches something like that, it then digs through and finally comes over at great speed. And they've recently set dirigibles down there, and sure enough, there are whole villages buried down there, visible with the help of submersibles. The Bosporus Channel is what we believe was the channel that led to this flood. The depth of the water now is roughly a half a kilometer. There's evidence that fleeing people from that area may have colonized sections of Europe, because suddenly we see at that time new ways of doing agriculture propulsive technology, which developed in that area. Now, I have other points that I would like to make and that I hope will come out both in the questions that I posed about the Holder and feedback to me and your own questions and answers. But all I'm saying to you now is this is an argument between two very different approaches to religion and two somewhat different uses of science. He's an attacker of science, an opponent of science. I'm a scientist. He is not a scientist. He does not do scientific work. He does not predict events and so forth in science. He does his work explicitly to try to cast doubt on science, to bring people back to what is to me a very simple-minded and not very mature approach to religion. Thank you.
Science. I taught it for 15 years. I want to cast doubt on pseudoscience, and I'm convinced that evolution, mixed in with our science books, is one of the dumbest and most dangerous religions in the history of the world. And there's no business being included with science books. So I'm not against science, I'm just against evolution. Just to set the record straight. Anyway, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for putting this together. You did go through some obstacles to get this here, didn't you? You need to get her story about what all happened on it. Okay, back in 1831, Charlie Darwin set off on a voyage to sail around the world. He graduated from Bible college to be a preacher. The only degree he ever got, by the way, and I'm sure Dr. Trivers considers Darwin a scientist, even though he never got a science degree. Darwin, as he sailed around the world, stopped off at the Galapagos Islands right there. There on those islands, he noticed 14 varieties of finches based on their beak shape. They were all finches, the same species of bird. He studied the birds carefully by measuring their beak shape and size, and decided probably all these finches had a common ancestor. I would agree, Charlie. It was a bird. And based on the variations of beak shape, well, this study was tested again, by the way, by the Grants back for 10-year study. This is from 9 to 10 millimeters. You know how much a millimeter is? They measured the beak shape difference between wet years and dry years, and after studying for 10 years, they noticed the beak shape varies on wet years and dry years, within a few tenths of a millimeter. I agree, variations happen, but there's still a bird. Okay? Then Darwin wrote his book in 1859 called The Origin of Species. Now, the Bible doesn't talk about species, it talks about kinds, and it says if they're able to bring forth, they're the same kind. You know, a dog and a wolf can bring forth. They can mate and bring forth. A dog and a pine tree cannot. Okay? They're different kinds. Charlie observed what is sometimes called microevolution. I object to the term, and I don't think we should use it, but they do, so I'll explain it. Microevolution tells us animals and plants can produce a variety within their kind. Variations can happen. It is observable, it is scientific, it is scriptural, it's also a fact. I happen to believe microevolution, if you want to call it that, works. It's fine. The question is, does it go any farther than that? For instance, we have big dogs and little dogs. These are probably the current extremes available in the dog family. But there's still a dog. And every 5-year-old kid knows there's still a dog. I've had 5-year-old kids do this all over the world. I'll give them this picture. I'll say, here's a dog, a wolf, a coyote, and a banana. Which one is not like the others? They get it every single time, okay? It's a dog. National Geographic ran an article about how the dog evolved from a wolf. I agree. If you want to use the word evolved, it's a variety of a wolf.